The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
There's a radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on The Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's fine.
Never be out-gravelled.
Can I get a bit of phlegm in the mix?
Bill English had a real gravel going on.
I like that.
Just a bit of a low rumbling gurgle.
Love that.
The kind of mucal subwoofer of the Ben Thomas system.
Tonsil
That's
viscosity level 10.
Incredibly sexy.
Tēnā koutou katoa. This has gone by lunchtime. My name's Toby Manhire. Hello, Annabelle Lee Mather.
Hello and happy birthday, Toby.
Kia ora, Ben Thomas.
What? How old are you?
Not telling.
Okay.
He's qualified for his gold card, so we're all going to Waiheke after this.
Ancient. Just about. Annabelle.
Yes.
Your television program, which is called The Hui, is now available on a podcast, I gather.
It is. It's on Spotify, Apple iTunes and Podbean.
Which feels like a little bit of a betrayal, but not nearly as much of a betrayal as Ben Thomas, who has recently been gallivanting with The Real Pod.
I think everyone knows that I only started doing the politics podcast as a way into reality TV commentary.
I was sitting at my desk working, and Ben Thomas bounded out of the podcast studio at the Spin-off, and I have never seen a happier human being in my life. His smile
It's an incredible
was as
betrayal.
wide as the North Island.
It's an incredible betrayal. I mean, we've got the Hui podcast, but you would never hear my voice on it.
That's right.
Whereas
That's right.
Ben's off on every other podcast he can get on.
Sucking up to people on Twitter.
If
Sucking
I was
up to reality TV podcasters.
now that my primary interest is reality TV, seeing the stories of real New Zealanders on our screens, if I had watched The Hui, if I'd seen Mihanani Forbes
Oh my God.
completely eviscerate the Prime Minister last week, where would I go for more Annabelle Lee Mather content?
You would go to iTunes?
What
Is
if
that what you mean?
What if I wanted to see
Apple
this?
Podcasts?
What if I wanted to see the story, uniquely New Zealand stories about real people on our state broadcaster? Then what would I do?
I think he's trying to win his way back into your good books.
We're not on the state broadcaster, Ben. We're on TV3.
RNZ. He means RNZ. He means.
What about the Casketeers?
New Zealand
Oh, the
Wars.
Casketeers.
What about the fucking Casketeers, Annabelle?
I thought you were talking about the Hui. Yes, the Casketeers.
So just
Casketeers,
too many
8
award-winning TV properties to keep track of.
I'm
just
sorry.
like
You could watch the Casketeers at 8 o'clock on Monday nights, or you could watch the New Zealand Wars series on RNZ, or the Hui on TV3. I'm sorry.
I was watching 7 Sharp last night, as you do, and there was a bit in Hillary was trying out a fancy coffin. And it was with Francis Tipene, who's the star of Casketeers, one of the great modern New Zealand television programs invented by Annabelle Lee Mather. Anyway, at one point, Jeremy Wells said to her, I mean, joking, but also he said, "You make a beautiful corpse."
It's a beautiful compliment.
Is it?
I hope someone says that about me one day.
When you're alive or when you're dead?
Preferably when I'm dead, but I'd take it alive.
Remember,
a lot of the time lately I look like a corpse anyway, so, I mean...
Newsboy is from the 90s, so it's, it's that real kind of Nick Cave sort of vibe. That's the sort of thing that was a compliment back in our day.
The gothic community would accept that compliment gladly, I imagine. Or the emos, as we call them now.
This is a politics podcast, so we're going to focus on the political corpses. Shout out and thanks to Flick Electric for the support of the politics section on the Spin-Off. Big thank you, and a sloppy kiss to Spin-Off members for your support and allowing us to have these high-level conversations about the issues of the day. Political corpses. There was a poll that came out last night on a Colmar Brunton poll for One News on TVNZ.
That they specifically released to support this podcast, eh?
Yes, they did. They helped us out there. And although it must have been infuriating, I felt sorry for Jessica Mackay because, you got your poll day, you've got your lead story, you fly up to Auckland, you're all ready to go, and then the fucking boat race.
Oh,
I know. All these boats going up and down and bobbing out of the water. It's quite fun. But obviously the news leads with that, and you're left sort of coming in second. Anyway.
So did we win?
What?
Have we got the cup?
No.
Oh.
We're recording this on Tuesday morning for all the boaties, America's Cup lovers,
This is more
patriots.
I'm going to emerge out of the studio into a world where the race is still on.
Yes. There might not be enough wind today, though, Ben. Because if it's less than 6.5 knots, they can't race. Did anybody see...
It disturbs me how much you know about this stuff.
Did anybody see the big event, though, which was Rock the Dock on Saturday? Did you see that, Jonathan, over there, who's on the... we've got one of New Zealand's great musicians helping us out today, and I'm surprised that you didn't watch Rod Stewart rock the dock.
Jonathan would rather...
You were at...
Crowded House.
Crowded House, all right.
I was going to say Jonathan would rather puncture his eyeballs and his eardrums than go to Rock the Dock.
He was watching Neil Finn of the Australian band Crowded House rather than the great New Zealand...
Of Fleetwood Mac.
The great New Zealand... This is a 100% pure New Zealand event with a 1972 Scottish folk song being sung by a 76-year-old.
Which was reproduced in full on the cover of the Otago Daily Times last week. They had an entirely black front page with the words to "We Are Sailing" on, and it's times like this that you're reminded in times of national crisis or unity what a powerful medium print can be.
Not to be a dick, but I really love that song.
Is that just sort of Stockholm syndrome from having to sing
Possibly.
it at its primary school assemblies in the 80s?
No, we used to actually sing Psycho Killer at our primary school in the 80s. I swear to God, that was the song we used to do. And One-Eyed, One-Horn, Flying Purple People Eater. Straight up. Waiheke area school.
Oh, Waiheke, yeah.
Because you grow up thinking these things are standards, but actually they're just whatever sort of grab bag of songs that the teachers learned to play with the 3 chords they were mandated to learn at teachers' college.
Yeah, we sang Sailing.
Shout out to my awesome music teacher, Mr. DeLu. He was the man.
Shout out to Mr. DeLu. I think that the best solution, if I was in judge, I would have just got Dave Dobbin, which you do, but instead of getting him to do, what's the one he normally does?
Welcome Home.
Yeah, no, I would have got him to do Loyal, but change the lyrics so it was Foil. Right. There's a poll last night, and it was one of those polls that was not really good news, particularly for anybody, was it? There were kind of people... The sort of big movement was Jacinda Ardern and the preferred Prime Minister going down 15 percentage points, but there's some methodology differences, which maybe we'll get to in a second. I think One News, whose poll it was, headlined it on National Party slipping, didn't they? Even though I should tell you what the numbers were. Basically, Labour 49% down 4, National Party 27 up 2, Greens 9 up 1, ACT steady on 8, New Zealand First steady on 2, Māori Party steady on 2, blah, blah, blah. Ben?
Yeah, I don't think you can ignore the methodological differences, and I think they pretty much account for everything in terms of those much lower preferred Prime Minister ratings for Ardern and Collins.
You better explain what the methodological changes were.
So, as part of this nation's progress towards a brighter future, elderly boomers have been excluded from these polls because they no longer sample landlines. They've gone to 50% mobile, 50% internet.
I was last night, after I finished watching 7 Sharp, now that I am basically a boomer, I then listened to Marcus Lush on 7 Talkback. And one of the subjects he was how people with landlines had been now excluded from the polling for the Colmar One News, and there are a bunch of people on landlines who rang up and were, a bit
exclusively
peeved that they
on
had now
landlines
been deleted from democracy.
Did Merv call?
No, I don't think Merv did. I didn't actually listen for
Merv.
long enough for Merv, but yeah, shout out to Merv as well.
Hey, Merv.
Oh, and the Bad Boys of Brexit, who we've
Bad Boys of Brexit still stuck here under the harsh quarantine conditions, making new lives for themselves.
So they got rid of the landlines, and now it's just 50% mobile phones and 50% online panel, I think.
Yeah, which is fine. As we've seen over the past few years, the maddest boomers have all gone onto Facebook, so they're familiar with the online milieu.
They love an online survey.
Yeah, they want to be part of the process, part of the discourse, part of the discussion. So what this methodology does seem to have done, if we look at the preferred Prime Minister rankings, is a higher percentage of people who say don't know or refuse to answer that question. Not quite sure why that is. Maybe people still think that it costs them minutes to be on their mobile, and they answer the party one and then go, I've got to go.
Don't know and refuse combined with 33%.
Wow.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of people who don't know.
Yeah, you often get a higher don't know on the Prime Minister because that's an unprompted question. So with the parties, they give you a list of the parties. With the politicians, they just say, with the Prime Minister, they just say, who do you want as Prime Minister? And you just have to say a name, which is why the huge popular grassroots support for Christopher Luxon is showing through.
He weighs steady on 2%. I mean, those preferred Prime Minister numbers, Michael Appleton, who's very good on polls and very good on cricket, he calculated that it was if you remove the don't knows and the refuse, that it's basically a 2% point swing because the Judith Collins dropped by, what was it, Bells?
Judith Collins is down 4%.
And proportionate to the 12% she started on, that's roughly, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think the major thing is that we can't take a lot from this poll, and you wouldn't expect that you would. Not a lot has changed over summer. Not a lot has changed since the election. We've had a couple of little lockdowns. We've had a couple of, the first one was maybe a little poorly handled because it led to the second one. There's been a bit of stuff happening on the margins. The government's housing policy has just sort of increasingly been shown up as worthless. On the other hand, those median voters in the middle who have all got 1 to 3 mortgages all gained about $200,000 in value over the summer break when everyone was at the beach. So you would not expect that there was any big movement either way. There's not a lot of room for Labour to go up. If house prices double before the end of the year, I think they might sort of get near 60. But otherwise, you wouldn't expect to see any kind of great divergence from the election result.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that Jacinda Ardern had taken a bigger hit than the Labour Party support, which is relatively steady, and I did wonder if that was COVID related because she is so intrinsically tied to that whole kaupapa, and the last 2 lockdowns obviously didn't go down well. But then when you look at the don't know and the refused, which is at 33%, incredibly high, it's kind of hard to really put too much into that.
Well, let's talk about that COVID response, shall we, since we're on it. There was the short, snap, 3-day lockdown, then we came out of that, of course, and then there was that Saturday night press conference.
It was quite a nice lockdown, that
you
first
quite
one.
liked the 3-day one?
I liked it. It was nice.
Then there was a 7-day lockdown. These are in Auckland, we should stress, and I mean, there are various different kind of arguments swirling around it, but one of the things that I think was interesting was the way management of the decision to move in Auckland from level 2 to level 1, which happened last Friday. There was a cabinet meeting held on the Thursday afternoon with a press conference, a scheduled press conference hosted by the Prime Minister at, I think, noon. It was either 11:30 or noon. And there was quite a lot of frustration and upset, and I think probably fair, to be honest, that the cabinet had made a decision in principle, it seemed, and they were waiting for some final test results. But if you were running a business that relied on moving into level 1, you didn't really have time to book staff or get supplies. And the point being, if you were having the cabinet meeting, could you not have announced an in-principle decision after that with a very heavy caveat, which is we have to say if the results come in tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. But at that point, the chances of the results was minuscule. It might have been 1 or 2, like very low. That was weird, wasn't it, Ben? I mean, I think on the whole, you have to say that Ardern and her government have handled that part of the equation extremely well in terms of communicating those things to people directly. And this seemed like one of the first slips in terms of, and in some ways it's trivial. Like it's not in the scheme of things a big deal, but keeping people on side and the social license stuff and the buy-in, whatever you want to call it, is really important.
It is a tricky position for them because I think if there's one thing that we, as Aucklanders, residents of New Zealand's City of Dreams, lockdown veterans on our, 4th tour now, have seen, it's that as soon as an alert level increase or decrease is announced, people just start acting as if it's already happened. So I think if you gave, 24 hours notice that FX, then we will drop down an alert level, I think, immediately at noon tomorrow, I think you would see people start to act as if it was level 1 immediately. Now, the only reason that's not a sort of totally sort of winning argument for the government is that personally I get the feeling level 2 is a bit of a fake level anyway. I don't think that there's widespread compliance. If you go to shopping malls, if you go to retail outlets, if you're just out on the street, there's no social distancing going on.
It's non-trivial if you're running an arts festival or a pride festival or a sports event.
That's right. I think that the burden for level 2 falls solely and unfairly on people organising events. It doesn't seem to me that the risk from an arts festival event is necessarily any greater than Kmart. But one of these people is, arts festival organisers are expected to bear the brunt of that, and I would sort of hope that our contact tracing and ability to convince people not to go to the gym, not to go to KFC, would be sufficient by now, that we wouldn't need to stymie these large events when we are reasonably confident that there's not any kind of unknown chain of transmission.
I think one thing that people do continue to do in level 2, although we're not great at it overall, is to continue to scan. And then once we hit level 1, it kind of goes out the window.
Kia ora, Justin Giovanetti here, and I'm the political editor at The Spinoff. This podcast, like so much of the work we do at The Spinoff, is made possible by the support of our members. To find out more about The Spinoff members and how you can help us keep producing quality, independent journalism, visit members.thespinoff.co.nz and do it today.
The other thing that came last week, Annabelle, was the announcement of the vaccine rollout and the timings for the kind of first 2 million of the team of 4 million, which is the adult population of the team of 5 million. and it's basically a staggered approach. People over 75, under 65, underlying health conditions. People in South Auckland go up if you have underlying health conditions or over 65. I think you go into an earlier category. Anyway, it's basically the rollout. And it was designed to try and answer some people's questions around clarity on when it was rolling out, while other countries around the world are moving faster, and some of that makes a lot of sense because they've got a lower threshold for risk, higher threshold for risk. They've got COVID teeming through their populations, but they also have apps where they can check, and Australia is ahead of us on that, etc. What did you make of that rollout, and can you tell us about, you did some polling for your television program, which is also now a podcast, on Māori perceptions around vaccines?
I think the government would be happy with the results of the poll that we did. We sampled 500 Māori, which is a great sample size for the Māori population.
Did you use landlines?
Good question. I'm not sure. I don't think we did. And it showed that about 65% of Māori are likely to take the vaccine, and only 12% say they definitely wouldn't, which is a really good starting point. And when you start to drill down into the reasons why, there's a lot of concern around what the long-term effects of the vaccine might be, which I think is a very reasonable concern to have, given how quickly the vaccine was developed. And interestingly, it showed that women were more likely to be concerned about it than men, and young people more likely to be concerned about it than older people. And potentially some of the reasons are that, younger women are planning to have children, and there's no evidence yet about what the long-term effects of the vaccine might be on pregnancies and that sort of thing. One of the other interesting results that came through is that what Māori are looking for is really good medical advice and evidence, and they don't care what iwi leaders say, they don't care what rugby stars say, they don't care what social media influencers have to say about it. That won't encourage them to take a vaccine. They care about what their GPs have to say, their primary health providers, and Dr. Ashley Bloomfield. So what they're really asking for is quality evidence, and I think that's perhaps where the government hasn't been so strong, is communicating and targeting those communities so that they really understand what the vaccine is about. Another major concern is access and the cost of a vaccine. And there's concern that while the vaccine might be for free, if you go into your GP, for example, to have a consultation about it, are you going to be getting charged for it? So there's some really interesting issues that come up, and I think, it'd be a good idea for the government. Excuse me.
Sorry,
is that some other platform trying to get you on?
Sorry, it is a client. I my phone is on super loud because I was talking to RNZ's First Up about the poll.
Oh, another.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was but it was at 5:40 or something.
Oh,
and any time I do radio interviews before 6 a.m., you're not getting my most sort of coherent or intelligible self. Oh, sorry, I thought
apparently not after 10 o'clock either.
Would you like the room? Do you want us to go away and come back when you're done?
It's fine. We can
pause. Jonathan, can you hit pause?
You guys can just work on.
You just do your thing.
Yeah.
But another issue that all of this raises is in terms of the focus on over 65s being prioritised. If you look at the Māori health outcomes when it comes to COVID infections, it shows that a 59-year-old Māori has the same health outcomes as an 80-year-old Pākehā who's infected with COVID. So what Māori want to know is that going to be taken into account with the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, that Māori are more likely to have underlying illnesses that essentially push them up into an older age bracket? So
Which is an echo of the superannuation argument, isn't it? In
That's
terms
right.
of the arguments for raising the age. One of the things that was interesting coming out of the Papatoetoe High School cluster was the challenges and shortcomings of the communications efforts in communities that are not necessarily consuming the mainstream media outlets, and so that's part of the challenge, isn't it? I mean, I know that when asked those questions, what they say is, yes, we've got a big program of work for sending those messages out, re-vaccination and the research, but they're trying to time it right, is the line they run. But it seems like the danger is when you've got other platforms like Facebook, you kind of want to, there's no time to waste, right?
In a lot of ways, the horse is bolted, and the government has really not got out in front of this issue and communicated well with Māori. And again, the Papatoetoe High School issue is a great example, and you've got them saying, oh, well, we sent them letters on this date and this date and this date. But when you read the letters, it says things like, we encourage families to go get a test. Well, that's not the same as saying we require you to go get a test. There's no date specified on when they'd like you to be tested by, but then whānau are criticised for, not getting them straight away. But you've got to understand that, these people may not have time to just step away from their jobs and go line up for several hours in a queue to go get tested. And unless you're saying to them, we need you to do this within 3 working days or whatever, then those are the sort of outcomes you're going to get. And it seems incredibly unfair to blame that community for those miscommunications.
Yeah, I think the government has dropped the ball on comms. And there doesn't need to be anything particularly special or subtle about it. They just need to adopt the sort of blanket, all fronts offensive that they did during that first lockdown last year when we first went to level 4. It just needs to be everywhere that any of the readers are, particularly Facebook, YouTube, where vulnerable communities are getting very, very bad advice about vaccines in general, usually from overseas grifters or from our own imported grifters here. Weirdo crank Jonathan Eisen is back, and David Fisher wrote a good story for the Herald. He's circulating about 20 or 30,000 copies of an anti-vax sort of published magazine. One of my friends found a copy in Gisborne at a cafe. Uncensored magazine, Investigate magazine is still all going strong on promoting these conspiracies. And what that first lockdown showed us is that you actually can reach most people. If you're willing to put enough money, enough time, enough resource into it, if you're willing to be very, very boring, that's actually what's needed here. Just drill those messages in, give people access to health professionals. Don't just make it trite sort of slogans, but actually, make sure that people understand it.
And the other thing too is just presuming that everyone is tuned into the 1:00 press conference. There's a lot of criticism of the Papatoetoe High School community. The line was, everybody knows the messages, everybody knows what they have to do. Well, actually they don't, and there's mixed messages, and you're presuming that like Māori whānau, new migrant whānau are all sitting around consuming media or information in the same way. You're assuming that they have internet access and all sorts of other things, and you just can't do that.
I mean, I do think I think there's no doubt that the communications campaign, particularly of around a year ago, was exceptional and better than just about anything in the world. However, at the same time, everybody was watching. And you can see that when you edit a website and you see the numbers on it. You can see it when you watch a live stream of a 1 p.m. and you see the numbers of, YouTube will tell you, Facebook will tell you how many people are watching, and it's heaps. Yesterday, I was watching the Prime Minister's post-cabinet press conference on the RNZ YouTube stream, and there were 62 people watching. Yeah, so it's a different. It has to be a different strategy this time because people aren't coming to you. You need to, I think, go to them a bit more actively.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
Kia ora, I'm Duncan Grieve, founder of The Spin-Off. You can help us keep all of The Spin-Off's award-winning journalism free for everybody by becoming a member today at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The one other thing I was just going to say in passing is when we're just on the COVID thing and this lockdown was some of the commentary I think needs pushing back a bit, which is to say just the line that there have been no cases, therefore, ergo, we didn't need to have the lockdown, seems to me a very stupid one. And it continues to be peddled quite widely, but it seems to me a bit like saying, I walked through a shooting range, wore a bulletproof vest, but didn't get hit. Therefore, I did not need to wear a bulletproof vest.
I haven't seen that much of that kind of commentary. I mean, I think the national opposition,
been too busy
their line would be that the second, for instance, David Seymour has said, the second lockdown was unnecessary because of a weakness in the contact tracing and making sure that they had covered all of the contacts. And there's an argument for that. But yeah, look, I mean, we're reasonably close to the finish line now. I still think that one of the things the Prime Minister needs to work on, we're just edit out all that fluffy around. But one of the constant themes, that we're seeing, particularly in housing as well, but I think now we're seeing in terms of the COVID response and the travel bubble to Australia is rhetoric to just sort of stall and placate the public, but no real intention of doing anything. If we think about a travel bubble with Australia, there's all these questions about when's the right time, when would be... Well, there's never going to... Apart from when both countries are fully vaccinated, there will never be a better time than there is now. There are sporadic outbreaks from MIQ, both in New Zealand and in Australia. In both cases, they are brought quickly under control. It seems insane. The most
and
likely,
if we have the border workers almost entirely vaccinated with 2 doses, as they will be in Australia, and the Pfizer vaccine Israeli real-world studies show that it's basically 90% effective in terms of transmission as well as not developing the disease. So it's
and right now all we're doing with visitors from Australia is we're putting them into hotels which have people with COVID in them before releasing them out into New Zealand. I mean, they're much more likely to get COVID in MIQ here than they are in Australia.
Who cares? We're not talking to Australia anymore.
Oh yeah, that's that Channel 9 thing.
Them.
Oh my God.
To me.
Cut them loose.
Cut them loose. We're just going to call them Zack biscuits from now on. Zack biscuits. We're losing the ant.
Just Zealand Army Corps.
Yeah.
I should just say when I was talking about the people saying 0 cases, I'm just talking about media commentary rather than political opposition. I mean, I think on the whole national.
No one should be listening to any media commentary except ours.
Chris Bishop is doing a pretty reasonable job, with Shane Retty around and so on. However, the National Party have had, while they seem to have kind of stabilised their response to COVID as an opposition, they've had this unfortunate landing of a report about, the campaign of 2020, which didn't go terribly well, and compounded by the fact that this report, which is apparently commissioned and kept by the board, and MPs can only go and see it if you, like the nuclear rooms, you've got to have sort of 2 thumbprints on either side of the room. You've got to lock up your firstborn child as,
a deposit.
It's a bit unfortunate, Ben.
Yeah, it's like going into the JFK archives. You're allowed to handle the bullet, but you're sort of watched by two people.
And this is, of course, because they're according to some. Apparently, there's been a bit of leaking in the National Party in the last, I guess, 5 years. And I mean, it seems weird to me that they don't do the obvious thing, which is distribute versions of the report to every MP, but change one word in like a key paragraph or one punctuation, and so that then when Tova reports it, that word you'll be able to, it'll be like a fingerprint.
Yeah, I mean, instead it's just going to sort of swirl around as amorphous kind of snatches of information. You can see why they'd want to keep it on the down low, because it really is in the most pure sense just kind of raking over a corpse. Right, the public,
beautiful corpse.
In terms of the beautiful corpse of the 2020 National Party, the public, there's not really any public interest in the post-mortem of the election.
There's a lot of interest from the public.
Yeah, that's right. We all like to read about other people's misfortune. Like, there's nothing I would like better than to just get a hold of it and just like Ready Player One, think, I remember when that embarrassing thing happened, and I can identify who that
Ponsonby Road chapter.
Yeah, I know who that person identified by one capital initial letter is. What times they were, but it's really a document for the party to chart its own way forward. I've been hearing a little disquiet about whether it is effective in that way. Few aspersions cast on the reviewers. The idea that maybe it's a slightly naive document, which tries to give tries to solve the problems of too much board power by giving the board more power.
Good call. Smart.
An idea that there was apparently a bit of a liberal slant on the whole thing. So one of the recommendations that's come out is more diversity, which I think
this report has been written by wokesters,
which I think is absolutely necessary for National to move forward, and of course the only way that you'll get more diversity in National is more board power, because left to their own devices, electorates across the country, and not just National electorates, tend to favour white men.
Landlines.
Yeah.
A lot of landlines.
A lot of landlines.
Yeah. I mean, if there's ever an argument for diversity in National, it's the Shane Reti effect, is it not? Who's helped transform National over a very short time from like a crazy group of like QAnon anti-vaxxers and non-COVID believers into a somewhat credible political force again. Oh, shout outs to Dr. Shane Reti on the birth of his new mokopuna. Which he tweeted about.
Let's wrap this podcast up by talking very quickly about the Mike Hosking situation. Was announced, it came to light at the start of last week that the Prime Minister's office had informed News Talk ZB that they would no longer be providing them with a weekly interview on a Monday morning in the media round, but it would now be an ad hoc situation, or had already been that for 4 weeks apparently, whereby ZB would need to say, could we please have the Prime Minister? And then they would say yes, if they could, and they thought it was relevant. Mike Hosking was pretty furious about that. Well, no, he presented
furious
to be indifferent to it because that's his style.
True.
But then basically said the Prime Minister was running for the hills and couldn't face questions and so forth. Is this a bubble thing, you guys? Is it a bubble thing that we get very excited about and that most people don't care about, or is it an important point of principle that reflects a leadership that no longer has the energy to deal with someone who's a real pain?
To be fair, I think she handles her interviews with Hoskins pretty well. I don't think that he destroys her. He gives her a great run for her money, and that's awesome. That's his job. But I don't think he absolutely throttles or humiliates her.
He says dreadful things separately to that, like and people are calling what did he say about Megan?
Hussy.
Called her a hussy. That's.
I believe Jacinda when she says that the Labour Party that she hasn't done a great job of making time for ethnic media and other groups. And to be honest, for the people that listen to ZB, there's plenty of opportunity for them to access the things they care about from other broadcasters. Yes, you still get to go for your free trips to Waiheke. Yes, you get to dispossess the next generation of New Zealanders of ever owning a home. You guys are all good. If you want to know that, tune into the AM show or whatever. There's lots of other outlets. But as someone who works in the Māori media, I can tell you it's really, really hard to get an interview with the PM because Monday, she does most of her press on a Monday. And I think it's great that she has recognised that, if you want to be the Prime Minister for all New Zealanders, you actually have to take the opportunity to communicate with those groups. And frankly, the stuff Mike Hosking cares about and the questions he asks aren't the ones that Māori or Pacifica or migrants or whatever other community it might be care about. So I think it's a good thing that she's making more time to focus on communicating with those groups.
Interview with the Prime Minister 2 weeks ago now? Is that a week? Show before last.
March the 1st.
How many episodes are there in the series?
40 episodes. We only got to once last
How many interviews do you need? How many interview slots do you want with the Prime Minister across the course of the season? And reasonable, and we'll come back and check it. And if you don't meet that mark, then she has to go back and do Mike Hosking every week.
I think ideally we'd like 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Okay. Ben, the other side of this, of course, is from a political standpoint, or it's the biggest commercial station. Talk station in the country, the morning show, and it is speaking to an audience of people, many of whom came across the aisle at the last election when, as we remember, Grant Robertson and Jacinda Ardern were all but declaring Labour the party, the lifeboat for the John Key and Bill English fan club.
Yeah, I think Annabelle's interpolation of what the Prime Minister is intending by this decision is...
That's literally what she said.
Yeah, that's right. And I do not believe it for a second. She is clearly just trying to avoid unpleasant interviews. I think after her experience with Mihi last week, I think she'll be ducking and diving from the hui just as much as she is from News Talk, because it was a tough interview for her. She really got held to account. If this in some way meant that she was indeed, scheduling a weekly interview slot with, Ta'ao on Māori TV, with Te Karere, with maybe Marae, with the hui, and, alternated those guys.
Gone by lunchtime.
Then I think, then I'd go, aha, bravo for expanding. But she's not going to do that. If you see her last slate of radio appearances were with The Breeze, with Country FM, with Solid Gold.
Don't you talk about the good people of Country FM.
She probably gets she don't even manage to get us off right on Country FM.
No, sorry, it wasn't Country FM.
It was The Country, which is the NZME station, isn't it?
Yeah, The Country. No, it was the actual country radio station. Basically, it was this slate. Maybe I'm getting the names wrong, but it was the slate of
the Rock the Dock FM.
Those kinds of shows, which John Key pioneered, right? Because John Key knew that if you went on those shows, if you went on a few of them, you got the same audience that you did listening to either Hosking or RNZ, and you just got asked about whether you'd had a pleasant week, what sorts of good things the government is doing for the country, and isn't it a great time to be a New Zealander?
Occasional bit of banter about masturbation and prison rape,
for the end of the year when you're doing your funny one, but and doing your derpies with kids is Barry Soper said.
What?
Barry Soper wrote this incoherent column about the PM's decision. He didn't hold it together as well as Hosking did.
Oh, about not enough drinks. Is that the one about not enough drinks on the night floor?
Yeah, the one about not being invited to enough drinks on the night floor.
Doesn't she understand that the tradition demands that you go out on a massive bender with senior members of the press gallery within a week of the new term? That's
and you
the
listen
rule.
to all their stories.
That is the rule. And they go, oh, you won't believe when we did this with John or Jim or... Yeah, I thought it was quite good. Funny that I didn't. The press conference when Soper was challenging Ardern as he should on her quitting the Hosking slot, she called him Brian. Excellent. She called him Brian.
But look, it's this is just part of the general trend that we're seeing. Key was a maestro of this. He sort of pushed out the boundaries of where you would expect to see the Prime Minister on a regular slot, and he knew that you go to soft entertainment. You do, Key did women's magazines as well. Jacinda wasn't the one who started that, and you communicate with people in these less adversarial ways. Now it's even easier with Facebook Live if you're the sort of person who is very good on social media, which Ardern is, and you're popular. She can easily pull in. I've seen Facebook Lives she does that get 400,000 viewers. I mean, that's the same as One News, but you don't have a pesky journalist, paraphrasing your words, and you don't have the opposition spokesperson tacked on to the end. I mean, if you're a politician, you'd be mad not to do that. But what it does mean is that there are fewer opportunities for accountability.
I disagree, because I think that if she keeps to her word, that she'll be getting held accountable by a range of groups with a range of issues that they care about. I really hope she sticks to what she says she's going to do. Because you're right, Ben, if she doesn't, then that's exactly what it is. But if the reason she's changed her time slot is true, then I think she'll be exposed to a greater level of accountability to a different range of communities.
Well, let's audit it
instead of just the boomers.
We'll do an audit on it later in the year. We'll do a survey.
Let's put in an OIA.
Call some landlines and find out
her media diary.
Let's do some journalism. Thanks, everyone.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I cordial with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.